Faith doesn't wait for things to look possible. Faith doesn't rely on reports, signs, or visible evidence. It functions best in the dark. It comes alive when there's no proof, no clarity, and no guarantee. The greatest demonstrations of faith in history were birthed not in celebration, but in uncertainty. Real faith doesn't whisper in the light. It roars in the shadows. That is why thanking God before the miracle is the truest expression of faith, because it declares confidence without confirmation. It praises without proof. It celebrates before certainty. When you can thank God in advance, before anything changes in your life, you are standing in a realm few dare to stand. It's a realm where logic bows and trust reigns. It's easy to thank God when the miracle is in your hands, but when it's only in your heart, when it exists only as a hope, a vision, a word, that's where true faith begins. You thank Him while the pain still lingers. You thank Him while the bills are unpaid. You thank Him while the diagnosis is still in the system. You thank Him while your dream still sleeps in silence. Faith that waits for evidence is not faith, it's observation. It's reaction. But faith that moves without sight, that shouts before the walls fall, that praises while the prison doors are still locked, that faith shifts reality. That kind of faith calls things that are not as though they already were. It declares a thing done when there's nothing visible to justify it, because it's rooted in who God is, not in what's happening. Most people only thank God when things are good, when life aligns with desire. But what happens when God gives a promise and nothing happens for years? What happens when what you see contradicts what He said? That's where faith is tested. That's where trust is refined. That's where your spiritual maturity is proven. And if you can still say thank you when the night is long and the promise is delayed, then you have entered the true dimension of faith, a place where you no longer depend on outcomes, but on the one who controls them. In that place, gratitude becomes an act of war. It becomes a declaration against fear, against unbelief, against disappointment. Every time you thank God in advance, you are saying to your storm, I already know how this ends. You're speaking from the future. You're reaching forward into what God has already prepared and pulling it into your present with your praise. That's what faith does. It doesn't wait for heaven to respond. It compels heaven to move. Gratitude in advance is the currency of the kingdom. It is how you transact with the unseen. It is how you put weight on the invisible and cause the spiritual to become tangible. Abraham thanked God for Isaac while Sarah's womb was still dead. Noah thanked God for rain while the skies were clear. Joshua thanked God for victory while Jericho's walls stood tall. These were not men who waited for evidence. They were men who created evidence by believing. And that belief was expressed in obedience, in praise, in action. It was expressed in advance gratitude. They understood that thanking God before the miracle wasn't foolish, it was prophetic. It was faith saying, I know who you are, and that's enough. Because thanking God in advance isn't just about the miracle you want. It's about the God you trust. It's not about manipulating outcomes. It's about aligning your heart with truth. The truth that He is faithful, the truth that He is good, the truth that He finishes what He starts. So even if you don't feel it, even if it doesn't make sense, even if it looks hopeless, you lift your voice. You lift your hands, you open your mouth and declare, thank you. That declaration shatters doubt. It silences the voice of fear. It confuses the enemy. Because when you thank God in a storm, you are no longer being moved by what's around you. You are being moved by what's within you. Faith begins where evidence ends, and gratitude is how you express that faith. It's not about denial. It's not pretending your struggle isn't real. It's choosing to believe that something greater is happening behind the scenes. It's believing that delay isn't denial, that silence doesn't mean absence, that the waiting season is still under divine control. So you thank Him, you praise Him, you honor Him not because you see the miracle yet, but because you know it's coming. And even if it doesn't come the way you expect, you thank Him still, because you trust His wisdom more than your understanding. You trust His heart more than your logic. You trust His timing more than your impatience. Faith doesn't require sight. It requires memory, the memory of what He's done, the memory of who He's been, the memory of promises already fulfilled. That memory fuels your gratitude. That memory reminds you, if He did it before, He'll do it again. And so you thank Him not as a ritual, but as a revelation. Not as a feeling, but as a decision. Not as a reaction, but as an activation. You thank Him because you know that thanking Him before the miracle is not weakness, it is strength. It is not naive, it is powerful. It is not premature, it is prophetic. Atmosphere is not just ambience, it's influence. It shapes expectation. It stirs belief. It controls how things grow or how they wither. Just like a seed needs soil, sunlight, and rain to flourish. Miracles require the right atmosphere to manifest, and nothing sets that atmosphere faster than gratitude. Thankfulness is not an afterthought. It's an architect. It builds the very environment where the supernatural feels welcome. Before anything changes around you, something must shift within you. And that shift begins the moment your mouth opens with gratitude in the midst of delay, pain, or uncertainty. Gratitude is the thermostat of your spirit. It regulates the spiritual temperature of your surroundings. When your soul is cold with fear, gratitude sets it ablaze with hope. When anxiety tries to choke your confidence, gratitude restores clarity. It changes not only what you feel, but what you attract. You cannot remain thankful and remain stuck in discouragement. One always pushes the other out. Gratitude is like oxygen in a room. When it's present, everything else can breathe. But when it's absent, everything suffocates, including faith. The atmosphere you carry determines the outcomes you see. When you walk into a room with bitterness, fear, or frustration, those things linger like heavy smoke. They cloud vision, they distort perception, they shut down possibility. But when you enter a moment with thankfulness, even if everything is falling apart, you change the air. You invite the presence of the miraculous into your space. Because God does not inhabit grumbling. He inhabits praise. He draws near to those who, in the middle of contradiction, still say, "Thank you." That moment is not weakness. It is a spiritual boldness that says, even if I don't feel it, I believe something greater is happening. Gratitude is a spiritual invitation. It signals to the unseen realm that you are ready, not just for an answer, but for alignment. You're not just asking for something to change, you're making space for it to arrive. Many people pray, but they do so in desperation, fear, or anxiety. They pray like beggars, not sons. They plead from panic, not from promise. But those who understand the power of gratitude shift the way they pray. They don't ask with dread, they thank with confidence. They understand that when they express thanks before the answer, they are prophesying with their praise. Gratitude in the waiting does something supernatural. It redeems time. It turns the slow moments into sacred ones. It turns delays into development. When you thank God while still in process, you declare that the process itself is sacred. You are not wasting time, you are investing it in faith. This kind of gratitude matures you. It silences the childish demand for immediate results and invites the deeper work of transformation. God doesn't just want to give you what you ask for, He wants to prepare you to carry it. And that preparation happens in the atmosphere of thanksgiving. When you cultivate a thankful spirit, you become the kind of vessel heaven can trust. Miracles are not given randomly, they are drawn to faith, and faith expresses itself through gratitude. The person who can worship with empty hands is the person who will one day carry overflow. The one who can thank God in lack is the one who will know how to steward abundance. Your thankfulness in lack is what makes you ready for fullness. It reveals your spiritual posture. It shows God that your faith is not tied to stuff, but to Him. And that kind of faith is magnetic to miracles. Your atmosphere is your responsibility. You may not control what happens to you, but you do control what you host within you. You may not be able to change your surroundings overnight, but you can change your attitude in a moment. And when you shift your inner world, your outer world begins to respond. Gratitude does not remove the struggle, but it transforms how you walk through it. It replaces frustration with focus. It turns fear into fuel. It transforms heaviness into a garment of praise. And where there is praise, there is presence. Where there is presence, there is power. You must learn to be intentional about the atmosphere you carry, especially in seasons of delay or disappointment. Complaining is natural, but gratitude is supernatural. It goes against the grain of how we are trained to respond to pressure. That's why it's so powerful. Anyone can praise after the blessing, but those who thank God before the breakthrough are the ones who shift rooms, break strongholds, and activate divine acceleration. Their environment reflects the climate of their spirit, peaceful, expectant, and full of life. The enemy's goal is not just to delay your miracle. It's to pollute your atmosphere so that even when the miracle arrives, you can't receive it. If he can fill your space with negativity, hopelessness, and offense, he can rob you of the joy that was meant to accompany your blessing. Gratitude is your defense against this. It is your shield. It protects your atmosphere from spiritual contamination. When your mouth is full of praise, your life becomes full of promise. Because what you magnify multiplies. If you magnify the problem, it consumes you. If you magnify God with thanksgiving, He fills the space with possibility. Gratitude is not emotional, it is strategic, it is not soft, it is spiritual warfare. Every time you choose to thank God before the miracle, you create an environment where angels move and faith breathes. You shift from being a victim of circumstance to being a steward of atmosphere. You become the kind of person who doesn't wait for things to feel good to give God glory. You give glory until things come into alignment with what He promised. That alignment is not random. It is cultivated by the constant and consistent choice to say, "Thank you." No matter what surrounds you, there is a sound that rises higher than pain, louder than fear, and more powerful than any spoken need. It is the sound of gratitude offered in advance, not as a reaction to what has happened, but as a declaration of what is coming. This sound does not emerge from comfort. It rises from confidence. Confidence not in what is seen, but in what is known deep within the spirit, beyond the reach of natural perception. It is this sound that shifts the atmosphere, disrupts patterns in the unseen realm, and unlocks divine intervention. The sound of gratitude is not ordinary, it is prophetic. It is spiritual language wrapped in human voice, telling heaven, "I believe you before I see it." Faith speaks. It has a voice, and that voice often sounds like thankfulness. Gratitude before the manifestation is a key that opens invisible doors. It is an instrument used not by the hands, but by the heart. When you thank God before the provision, you're making a sound that heaven recognizes. That sound travels where the eye cannot see. It penetrates the realm of delay, confusion, and silence. It cuts through discouragement and doubt. When you release gratitude into the air, you are doing more than speaking. You are shifting dimensions. You are bringing your future into your present. You are activating unseen realities by your spoken trust. The invisible world responds to faith, not fear. Faith doesn't need evidence to speak. It creates the evidence. And the moment your spirit chooses to thank God despite the absence of visible change, your gratitude becomes a weapon. It breaks chains you didn't even know existed. It begins moving things behind the scenes. Angels are activated by gratitude. Power is stirred in the unseen when thankfulness is declared without hesitation. Because gratitude is not passive. It is not merely polite. It is forceful. It's bold. It's radical, because it refuses to wait for things to change before it rejoices. Gratitude is spiritual vision. It sees what others cannot. While others are rehearsing disappointment, gratitude is rehearsing the promise. While others are dwelling on delay, gratitude is preparing for delivery. It sees the invisible, and because it sees it, it speaks. Gratitude declares the outcome before the process has finished. It is rooted in the nature of God, not in the nature of the problem. This is why gratitude carries so much power. It removes your dependence on sight and places your hope in sovereignty. You don't need to see how it will happen. You only need to know who is behind it. When Jesus stood before Lazarus' tomb, he did not beg or weep for a miracle. He gave thanks, not after Lazarus walked out, but before. That moment wasn't for show. It was a model, a template, a revelation that thanksgiving is not a reaction to a miracle. It is a trigger. It is a spiritual protocol that unlocks the impossible. When he said, "Father, I thank you," he demonstrated the law of the kingdom. Before manifestation comes recognition. Before evidence comes expression. He did not wait to thank the Father after Lazarus was raised. He thanked in advance, and that gratitude released resurrection. This principle remains. The spiritual realm has not changed its protocol. It still responds to gratitude because gratitude speaks from the end. It speaks as if it has already seen the finished story. It sounds like someone who's already walked through the storm, already stood in victory, already held the miracle. That's why it confuses the enemy. He expects you to be silent in the struggle. He expects your voice to disappear in the darkness. But when your thanksgiving rises before the breakthrough, it disrupts every plan designed to silence your faith. The sound of gratitude draws the presence of God. It is irresistible to him, not because he needs it, but because it is the purest evidence that you trust him without conditions. Anyone can sing after the sea splits, but when you lift a song while the waves still rage, you are participating in something divine. You are mirroring heaven. You are aligning with the nature of the unseen. You are proving that your confidence is not built on outcomes, but on intimacy with the one who promised. Thanksgiving is the sound of spiritual maturity. It is the voice of someone who knows who their source is. You cannot remain grateful and remain small in your thinking. Gratitude enlarges you. It stretches your spirit to receive more. It tunes your ears to hear more. It cleanses your eyes to see beyond what's in front of you. That's why gratitude always precedes miracles. Because before God changes what's around you, he changes what's within you. And gratitude is the most powerful evidence that the change has already begun inside. There is a reason heaven is full of praise. It is because heaven has perfect vision. There is no confusion, no delay, no uncertainty, just perfect trust. When you thank God before your miracle, you are pulling that atmosphere into your now. You are saying, "I may be on earth, but my heart is in alignment with heaven." That alignment creates access. That sound creates movement. That declaration creates collision between the unseen and the seen. Gratitude before the breakthrough declares that your timeline is not controlled by fear, pressure, or desperation. It is controlled by God, and your faith is not waiting for evidence. It is becoming the evidence. Your voice, lifted in gratitude, becomes the very proof of what is coming. It is no longer a question of if, but only when. And while you wait, you will not stay silent. You will not sit still. You will not dwell in disappointment. You will lift the sound that tells your circumstance, your atmosphere, and your future. I believe, I see, I receive. So I give thanks now. Timing is one of the most difficult aspects of life to surrender. Human beings crave control, certainty, and predictable outcomes. We're wired to want things when we want them, how we want them, and exactly in the way we imagined. But spiritual maturity is revealed in how we respond when nothing arrives on our schedule. When prayers aren't answered according to our timeline, when dreams seem delayed, and when it feels like heaven is silent, the heart has a choice to make: panic or praise. Gratitude in these moments is more than a positive attitude. It is proof that you trust the timing of God above your own understanding. When you say thank you before the miracle, you are not just expressing faith, you are submitting to divine timing. You're telling God, I believe you are not late, even though my eyes can't see movement. That declaration tears down the illusion of human control. It dismantles the idol of urgency. Gratitude is a weapon against the anxiety that time creates. It tells your soul that the waiting is not wasted, that the silence is not punishment, that every delay is either preparation or protection. There is a deep confidence that flows from trusting that God is never bound by your clock. He doesn't panic when deadlines approach. He doesn't flinch when opportunities seem missed. He sees the end from the beginning. He knows what you need and when you need it. Gratitude that flows before the blessing arrives is your way of saying, I'm not just trusting that you will do it. I'm trusting that you know exactly when to do it. That's a higher level of trust. That's spiritual surrender. Trusting God's timing requires a shift in mindset. You stop viewing time as your enemy and start viewing it as God's tool. Every second that passes is not robbing you, it's refining you. Every day that feels empty is actually filled with hidden work that your natural eyes cannot perceive. Gratitude teaches you to believe that behind every delay, God is orchestrating details you could never arrange on your own. And because of that, you thank Him not reluctantly, but joyfully, because you know that the one who promised is also the one who schedules the fulfillment. Thanksgiving becomes your song in the hallway while you wait for the doors to open. It becomes your anthem in the quiet when the spotlight hasn't turned your way yet. You begin to understand that if God hasn't released it yet, then it's not because He's forgotten. It's because He's perfecting. You thank Him not only for what's coming, but for the wisdom in the waiting. You stop demanding answers and start appreciating alignment. Because it's not just about getting the miracle. It's about being ready for it when it comes. Gratitude in the waiting is how you get ready. There's something powerful about a person who can smile when others expect them to be stressed, who can worship while others complain, who can say, God, I trust you, with tears in their eyes. That person is dangerous to darkness, because their faith is not fragile. It doesn't depend on visible results. It's rooted in eternal truth. And that truth is this: God's timing is flawless. He's never rushed, never caught off guard, never playing catch-up. He knows every hair on your head and every step of your journey. And when you say thank you, in the middle of confusion or disappointment, you align your heart with that truth. Gratitude also protects you from comparing your timeline with someone else's. In a world obsessed with speed and instant success, it's tempting to look at others and feel left behind. But Thanksgiving shifts your focus. It reminds you that your story is not meant to look like anyone else's. Your path is not delayed, it's designed. Gratitude says, I don't need what they have because I trust what you're doing in me. It silences jealousy. It silences frustration. It makes room for peace. That kind of gratitude is not shallow. It's born in the furnace of faith. It's forged in the fire of surrender, and it creates unshakable endurance. Trusting God's timing means learning how to rest. Not the rest of inactivity, but the rest of assurance. You stop striving. You stop wrestling. You stop trying to manipulate outcomes. You simply rest in His character. That rest expresses itself in gratitude. Every thank you becomes a declaration that your heart is not tied to how fast things happen, but how faithfully God leads. You begin to see that the miracle is not just in the outcome. It's in the development taking place while you wait. And so you thank Him for every day that seems uneventful, knowing that heaven is never still even when earth is quiet. There are countless examples throughout time of those who waited with gratitude, people who praised in advance, people who worshiped not with sight but with vision. These are the ones who see miracles. These are the ones who enter into the fullness of promise. Because their hearts were not limited to earthly measures of progress, they were aligned with divine pace. Gratitude becomes their rhythm, it becomes their compass, and no matter how long it takes, they remain steadfast, anchored, and joyful, because they trust that God's timing is never flawed. Gratitude in the waiting is a testimony. It tells the world that you serve a God who's worth trusting, even when you don't understand the delay. It tells your own soul that peace is possible, even in the tension between promise and fulfillment. It sets your eyes not on what you lack, but on who you follow. And that shift changes everything. Because when your eyes are fixed on the one who controls time, you stop fearing the clock. You stop measuring your worth by speed. You begin to live with a deeper rhythm, the rhythm of grace, the rhythm of obedience, the rhythm of trust. And that rhythm is only sustained through a heart of thanksgiving. Waiting is one of the most testing seasons in life, not because of what we lack externally, but because of what is challenged internally. In the waiting, the mind runs wild with questions, the heart becomes restless, and the soul begins to ache for closure or breakthrough. We want movement, progress, and answers, but often in divine timing, the silence is intentional. It is in the waiting that character is tested, trust is refined, and motives are exposed. But what many fail to realize is that waiting doesn't have to be a prison. It can be a sanctuary. Waiting doesn't have to produce frustration. It can produce worship. And the bridge between those two outcomes is thankfulness. Thankfulness is not a passive emotion. It's not a cheap reaction to good news. It's a deliberate posture, a chosen perspective that redefines how we experience the in-between. Gratitude in the waiting doesn't mean you ignore the tension. It means you transcend it. You no longer see the waiting room as wasted time, but as sacred space. You're not just stuck between promise and fulfillment, you're being shaped by it. And that shaping process is where worship is birthed. True worship isn't always about music or melodies. It's about acknowledging God's worth even when you're still hoping for His hand to move. It's about recognizing that He is just as worthy in the silence as He is in the shout. When you choose to thank God in the middle of your waiting, you are not doing it because everything makes sense. You're doing it because you trust that even in the ambiguity, God is present. Even in the delay, He's working. Even in the unanswered prayers, He's weaving together something far more meaningful than you could ever plan. Thankfulness in the waiting is not denial. It's surrender. It's releasing the illusion of control and replacing it with the reality of faith. And that kind of gratitude transforms your waiting from a battlefield of anxiety into a sanctuary of presence. There is something powerful about the kind of worship that rises before results. It's the kind of worship that heaven honors. It doesn't need confirmation to lift its voice. It doesn't need proof to raise its hands. That kind of worship is forged in the hidden places, in the silent prayers, in the long nights, in the unchanging reports. But even there, thankfulness says, God, you are still worthy. And that declaration changes the climate of your soul. It lifts the heaviness. It breaks the weight of worry. It breathes fresh air into tired lungs. Because when you worship with thankfulness in the wait, your soul remembers who is in control. You begin to realize that what God is doing in you during the waiting is often more important than what you're waiting for. The delay isn't always about the destination. It's about your development. It's about learning to depend on His voice more than your own plan. It's about becoming so anchored in His character that you don't flinch when the timeline stretches. Gratitude is what keeps your focus aligned. It tells your spirit, this season is not punishment. This is preparation. And when you believe that, your waiting becomes worship, not because the circumstances change, but because your perspective does. Gratitude doesn't eliminate the desire for the miracle. It simply elevates your awareness of the miracle worker. You stop obsessing over outcomes and start rejoicing in relationship. You stop asking, when will it happen? And start declaring, thank you for who you are in the meantime. That shift is where peace enters. That's where strength is renewed. That's where joy is sustained. Because thankfulness does not ignore reality. It speaks a higher reality. It speaks from a place of knowing that God's timing is intentional, His plan is perfect, and His presence is enough even when nothing else seems certain. Worship fueled by gratitude in the waiting produces endurance. It silences the voice of comparison and stops the enemy from using time against you. Because nothing frustrates darkness more than someone who chooses to bless the Lord while in the valley. Nothing weakens doubt more than consistent praise offered in the absence of visible evidence. When you worship in your wait, you rob fear of its power. You take authority over the moment. You remind every force opposing you that your spirit is unshaken, not because of what you have, but because of who you trust. This kind of thankfulness is not common. It's not automatic. It must be cultivated. It takes a decision to resist the urge to complain, to fight off the temptation to wallow, and to anchor your mind on things above. It's a daily choice to wake up and say, even if nothing changes today, I will still thank you. I will still lift my voice. I will still call you faithful. That repetition transforms your heart. It becomes muscle memory for your soul. It becomes your rhythm of life, not dependent on breakthroughs, but built on belief. Worship that rises from a grateful heart in the middle of uncertainty is the kind that moves heaven. It's what allows you to live in peace while others are panicking. It gives you the ability to smile through storms and to rest in what others fear. Because thankfulness is your anchor and worship is your expression of that anchored faith. And that combination cannot be shaken. It cannot be stopped. It cannot be silenced. The waiting becomes the stage for worship, not because you are pretending everything is okay, but because you know that even in the pause, God is at work. He's refining you, stretching you, preparing you, and every time you lift your hands in thankfulness, you are declaring that He is worthy, not just because of what He will do, but because of who He is right now. That's how waiting is transformed, not by escape, but by encounter, not by answers, but by alignment. And gratitude is what aligns your heart to worship fully in the middle of it all. The power of gratitude before the miracle is not just a concept. It's a kingdom principle. It is the language of unshakable faith, the posture of surrendered trust, and the atmosphere where the impossible becomes reality. It's not about ignoring the problem, it's about honoring the promise. It's not waiting for things to feel right. It's choosing to believe that God is right, no matter how things look. When you thank God before the answer, you declare that your faith is deeper than your feelings, that your trust is stronger than your timeline, and that your hope is anchored in something greater than circumstances. This gratitude activates faith, shifts spiritual atmospheres, unlocks the invisible, aligns you with divine timing, and turns seasons of waiting into sacred moments of worship. Gratitude is not a reaction, it's a revelation. It's what turns ordinary moments into supernatural doors. It's what transforms hearts, homes, and histories. And when you live with this kind of thankfulness, you don't just wait for miracles. You live in expectation of them. Because the sound of gratitude isn't just heard on earth. It's felt in heaven, and heaven always responds.